The town of Oak Ridge was like any other small American town, charming and serene, nestled among rolling hills and dense forests. Its streets were lined with quaint shops and cozy homes, and every year on the 4th of July, the town came alive with vibrant celebrations. Families gathered in the town square, children ran around with sparklers, and the air was filled with the scent of grilled meats in anticipation for the fireworks that would light up the night sky. But this year, something sinister lurked beneath the surface of the festivities. Eloise and her husband Mark had recently moved to Oak Ridge. They had fallen in love with the town's charm and the promise of a quieter life away from the hustle and bustle of the city. They had purchased a beautiful old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, a fixer-upper with a sprawling garden that Eloise was eager to restore to its former glory. As the 4th of July approached, excitement buzzed through Oak Ridge. Eloise and Mark eagerly joined in the preparations, helping to decorate the town square and planning a small gathering at their new home. They had been warmly welcomed by their neighbors, who were eager to introduce them to the town's traditions and history. On the morning of the 4th of July, the sun rose bright and cheerful over Oak Ridge. The town square bustled with activity as vendors set up stalls selling lemonade, hot dogs, and cotton candy. Children darted around in patriotic attire, waving miniature flags and eagerly anticipating the evening's fireworks display. Eloise and Mark spent the day mingling with their neighbors, soaking in the festive atmosphere. As dusk approached, they headed back to their Victorian house to prepare for their gathering. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the overgrown garden as they set up tables and chairs on the spacious front porch. As darkness descended over Oak Ridge, the town square filled with eager spectators awaiting the fireworks. Eloise and Mark's gathering was in full swing, laughter and music mingling with the distant strains of patriotic songs. But as the first fireworks exploded in a dazzling array of colors, a sense of unease settled over the town. At first it was subtle, a flicker of movement in the shadows, a whisper in wind that seemed to carry voices from a distant past. Eloise brushed off the sensation, attributing it to the excitement of the evening. But as the fireworks continued, the unease grew stronger, a knot tightening in the pit of her stomach. Then, in the midst of the grand finale, chaos erupted. A deafening explosion rocked the town square, sending sparks and debris flying through the air. Screams echoed through the night as people scattered in panic, searching for safety amidst smoke and confusion. Eloise's heart pounded in her chest as she instinctively turned toward her home, fear gripping her like a vice. "Mark!" she screamed, pushing through the fleeing crowd. She stumbled over fallen chairs and abandoned picnic blankets, her mind racing with dread. Where was Mark? Had he been caught up in the blast? Amidst the chaos, she spotted her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, frantically trying to gather her grandchildren. "Eloise, dear, are you all right?" Mrs. Thompson called out, her voice trembling with fear. Eloise nodded, her eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of her husband. "Have you seen Mark?" she asked urgently, her voice hoarse with panic. Mrs. Thompson shook her head, her face pale. "I haven't seen him since the explosion. We need to get out of here, Eloise. Something terrible is happening." Eloise's heart sank as dread washed over her. She fought back tears, knowing she had to find Mark no matter the cost. With trembling hands, she dialed his number on her phone, praying for a response. To her relief, Mark answered on the third ring. "Eloise, thank God you're okay," he exclaimed, his voice strained with urgency. "I'm at the house. Get here quickly, something's not right." Relief flooded through Eloise as she hurried through the chaos, following Mrs. Thompson toward the edge of town where their Victorian house stood. The streets were eerily quiet now, the distant sounds of sirens echoing in the night as emergency responders rushed to the scene of the explosion. As they reached their street, Eloise's heart sank once more. Their house loomed in the darkness, its once inviting facade now shrouded in shadows. The front porch where they had gathered just hours before was now deserted, chairs overturned and decorations scattered by the wind. Mark stood on the porch, his expression grave as he scanned the street for any sign of danger. He rushed to meet Eloise as she approached, enveloping her in a tight embrace. "I was so worried," he mumbled, his voice choked with emotion. Eloise clung to him, her relief mingled with lingering fear. "What happened, Mark? What's going on?" Mark hesitated, his brow furrowed in thought. "I don't know exactly," he admitted quietly, "but whatever caused that explosion in the town square, it wasn't normal. It felt sinister." Eloise shivered, chill running down her spine. Sinister? What do you mean? Mark glanced around nervously, as if searching for words to explain the inexplicable. I saw something just before the explosion, he began hesitantly. A figure in the shadows, watching the crowd. It didn't look human, Eloise. Its eyes, they were glowing. Eloise's blood ran cold as she processed Mark's words. Glowing eyes? What are you talking about, Mark? I know it sounds crazy, Mark replied, his voice trembling slightly, but I swear I saw it. And then the explosion happened. It was like, whatever it was, it triggered it. Eloise stared at him in disbelief, her mind reeling with fear and confusion. The town square had always been a place of joy and celebration, but now it felt like a nightmare unfolding before her eyes. We need to get out of here, Mrs. Thompson's voice interrupted their conversation, her eyes wide with fear. There's something in this town, something dangerous. Mark nodded grimly, his jaw set with determination. We can't stay here. We need to find out what's happening and get help. With that, they hurried inside the house, locking the door behind them and gathering around the kitchen table. The night stretched on in tense silence, punctuated only by distant sirens and the occasional flicker of lights outside. As dawn broke over Oak Ridge, Eloise and Mark ventured cautiously outside, their eyes scanning the deserted streets for any sign of life. The town square lay in ruins, the aftermath of the explosion a stark reminder of the terror that had unfolded just hours before. Emergency crews were still on the scene, combing through debris and tending to the injured. The townspeople gathered in small groups, their faces pale with shocking confusion. Rumors swirled through the crowd, whispers of a mysterious figure seen before the explosion, of strange occurrences in the days leading up to the 4th of July. Eloise and Mark joined their neighbors, offering comfort and support as they tried to make sense of the senseless violence that had shattered their peaceful town. But amidst the chaos and confusion, one question remained unanswered. What had caused the explosion? And who, or what, was responsible? Days turned into weeks as Oak Ridge struggled to recover from the tragedy. The town square was cordoned off as investigators searched for clues, while the townspeople tried to piece together their shattered lives. Eloise and Mark stayed close to home, their once idyllic Victorian house now a refuge for the growing unease that gripped the town. The sense of dread never truly left them. Night after night, Eloise found herself haunted by nightmares of glowing eyes and shadowy figures lurking in the darkness. She woke in a cold sweat, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to shake off the lingering fear. One evening, as she sat alone in the dimly lit living room, Eloise heard a faint scratching sound coming from the hallway. Her breath caught in her throat as she listened intently, her senses on high alert. The scratching grew louder, accompanied now by a soft, rhythmic tapping that seemed to echo through the empty house. Heart pounding, Eloise grabbed a flashlight from the table. She cautiously approached the hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, the sound echoing eerily into silence. As she rounded the corner, the scratching intensified, seeming to come from the closed door at the end of the hall, the door to the attic. She hesitated for a moment, her hand trembling as she reached for the doorknob. With a deep breath, she turned it slowly and pushed the door open, shining the flashlight into the darkness beyond. The attic was shrouded in shadows, the beam of light revealing dust-covered boxes and forgotten relics of years past. But what caught Eloise's attention was a figure huddled in the far corner, its back turned to her. It was unmistakably human, yet its presence sent a chill down her spine. "Hello?" Eloise called out tentatively, her voice barely whisper. "Who's there?" The figure didn't respond. Its shoulders hunched as if in pain or despair. Eloise took a cautious step forward, her pulse racing with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Are you okay?" she asked again, her voice gaining strength. "What are you doing up here?" Slowly, the figure turned toward her, and Eloise gasped in horror at what she saw. Its face was contorted with agony, its eyes hollow and lifeless, and yet they glowed with an otherworldly light that sent a shiver down her spine. Before she could react, the figure lunged toward her with unearthly speed, its hands outstretched as if reaching for her throat. Instinct took over as adrenaline surged through Eloise's veins. She stumbled backward, fumbling for the attic door, her heart pounding in her ears. With a desperate shove, She slammed the door shut and bolted down the hallway, the sound of scratching and tapping echoing behind her. She raced down the stairs, her feet slipping on the polished wood as she fled toward the safety of the front door. Mark appeared in the doorway, his face pale with concern. "Eloise, what's wrong? What happened?" Eloise could barely speak, her breath coming in ragged gasps. There's something in the attic," she managed to choke out. I saw it. The glowing eyes." Mark's expression hardened with determination. "We need to get out of here now." Together they rushed outside and into the waiting car, leaving behind their once beloved Victorian house and the nightmare that had unfolded within its walls. As they drove away from Oak Ridge, the sense of relief was palpable, yet the questions lingered. What had they encountered that night? And would they ever find answers? Months passed and Oak Ridge slowly began to heal from the tragedy that had rocked the town to its core. The town square was rebuilt, and life returned to some semblance of normalcy. But for Eloise and Mark, the memories of that faithful 4th of July would haunt them forever. They relocated to a new town, far from Oak Ridge and its lingering shadows. Yet, even in their new home, they couldn't escape the nightmares that plagued their sleep. The glowing eyes, the figure in the attic, and the inexplicable terror that had shattered their sense of security. They tried to move on, to rebuild their lives in the wake of the inexplicable horror they had witnessed, but deep down, they knew that some mysteries were not meant to be solved, and some nightmares were not meant to be forgotten. As another 4th of July approached, Eloise found herself standing alone on the porch of their new home, watching the distant fireworks light up the night sky. The echoes of the past lingered in her mind, a reminder of the darkness that had once threatened to consume them. And as she gazed at the stars above, she couldn't help but wonder, would the town of Oak Ridge ever truly be free from the sinister forces that had unleashed terror on that fateful night?